What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Robbie here, coming right back at you with another YouTube video. Now for today's video, I'm going to be doing something that I haven't yet done before on this channel, but I want to start doing more often. Now, Slipknot are one of my favorite bands. I listen to their music on a daily basis. And this video, I'm basically just going to be going over their discography, analyzing each of their studio albums, talking about what's good about them and kind of what's not so good about certain ones of them. So hopefully any of y'all out there who haven't yet gotten into Slipknot, this video is going to be helpful in, well, getting into Slipknot. Yeah, I don't have a script for this video. I'm just speaking off the top of my head. If I seem kind of incoherent, that's because why. Without further ado, let's get started with their first album, Slipknot's self-titled album. Now, normally it takes bands a couple years to release their breakthrough album. Their first album, while still usually good, they're still kind of finding their footing. But Slipknot are an outlier in this case. Their first album was not only their breakthrough album, but some could argue it's their best album. If I could describe this album in one word, that word would be angry. This album is a result of 9 pissed off dudes from Iowa who just want to make some hardcore fucking metal music and let the world know just how angry they are. Angry at themselves, angry at life, angry at the world in general. That's why I feel this album became so popular. This was around the time where rap metal and nu metal was so popular amongst the edgy, angsty, wannabe kids. And, Slipknot's nihilistic, life-hating music, appealed to them, and that got them that got them the level of success that they achieved with this album. The album starts off with a bang. The intro track, which the title is all numbers I can't remember, so you can look it up because I'm not going to say it. It segues really nicely into the actual opening song, Sick, and the opening riff to that song is holy shit, it's awesome. It's a perfect way to start off the band's first album. Other highlights on the album include Surfacing, which has this really unorthodox guitar intro. It sounds sort of like tapped pinch harmonics, sort of. I don't know how to properly describe it. I thought it was an electronic sound effect until I saw them playing it live and realized that it was something else. Eyeless. The song Eyeless has one of the best drum intros I've ever heard. It's definitely something I don't think most drummers could do. It's definitely one of Joey Jordison's best moments on the album. Wait and Bleed is, I feel, their most popular song off the album. It's, I feel, the song that got them their popularity that they achieved from this release. It's only like 2.5 minutes, but, that's kind of all they need to make that's kind of all they need to get their point across. And Spit It Out is definitely the most hip-hop track off this album. It's decidedly rap metal and features Corey Taylor spitting some of the best rhymes that I've heard from a white dude from Iowa in probably my entire life. Yeah, this is a great way to start your studio album discography, but it's not their best album. That album would be their second album, Iowa. Now, if Slipknot's self-titled album was just angry, then Iowa is just full-blown psychotic. That's the best way I can put it. This is easily the most nihilistic, most misanthropic album I've heard since Swan's debut album, Filth, although that's in a world of its own, really. Kind of the reason this album is the way it is because Slipknot were not in a good place when they recorded this album. The hype around their first album kind of led to a lot of pressures to release a perfect, flawless second album, and they did release a perfect second album. Just the stress that they were under. Everyone was either drunk or on drugs at the time of this recording. Everybody hated each other. The band almost broke up. And several members, in fact, almost all of the members at the time said that was their lowest moment as a band. The only one who didn't was their bass player, but, bass players, they're not exactly right in the mind. I'm joking, I'm a bass player myself, I love those guys. The album starts off perfectly, considering the mood of the album. The intro track, 515, is just distorted static with samples, players, Craig Jones, sorry I got the name wrong, with Craig Jones just sobbing and screaming in the studio, and it's distorted to sound like more sinister and stuff. It's great way to start the album, guys. Then it segues nicely into People Equals Shit, which is cringy song title, but a great song. Nonetheless, it perfectly sums up how they were feeling at the time. The Heretic Anthem. They actually played that live on Conan one time. I'm still surprised that they were able to do that because, well, it's not exactly a song that you usually expect to see on late night talk shows. It's a bit extreme for that. The Heretic Anthem, that song also is sort of kind of like People Equals Shit. It's sort of like Slipknot saying, hey, we don't give a fuck what you think. We're going to do what we want ourselves. What's personally my favorite song on the album, Disaster Piece, is listening to that song is an experience because it's easily the most... I mean, I've heard more emotional music in terms of, sad emotional. This is emotional in terms of just, furious, just angry, upset, pissed at the world. Literally, the first lyrics of the song are, I want to slit your throat and fuck the wound. I'm not even joking. And the album's closing track, the self-titled song, is, I kid you not, 15 minutes long. And it's one of the few songs I've listened to where I got uneasy while listening to it. That's how great it is. So yeah, I feel like this is their best album. You can fight me on that. Up next, we have their third album, Volume 3, The Subliminal Verses. Now, Volume 3 represented sort of a stylistic change for Slipknot. Right after the psychosis of Iowa, this probably still is their most chill release. I might even say the most mainstream release. I can kind of understand why they'd want to do that, because after just the process of Iowa, which is just so negative and depressing, they'd probably want to make a more, upbeat, less psychotic album. You feel me? I haven't listened to this album as much because, I feel it's honestly somewhat forgettable. Some of the tracks, there are a couple standouts. Duality, which is one of their most famous songs ever. The infamous line, I push my fingers into my eyes, continues to be memed on metal meme pages nowadays, and including my own. Before I Forget was the mainstream hit on the album. It has one of the more catchier choruses I've heard in any of Slipknot's songs. And of course, there's Vermillion Part 1 and the immortal Vermillion Part 2, which was their first ever all-acoustic song. So it has no percussion, bass, just Corey Taylor singing, acoustic guitars, and some keyboard sound effects in there. It's definitely a really beautiful track. Yeah, I don't have a lot to say about this album because, like I said, a lot of the tracks are kind of forgettable, not really worth talking about. Moving on to the next album, All Hope Is Gone. Now, All Hope Is Gone was Slipknot's last album with their classic 9 lineup. As following this album's release, bass player Paul Gray unfortunately died of a drug overdose, and drummer Joey Jordison either left or was fired, depending on who you ask. This album is basically, I could describe it as a straight-up groove metal album. It's still super freaking heavy, but it has less of the chaos of, Slipknot and Iowa-era Slipknot. It's... A lot of people think it's their worst album, and I can see why, because listening to this album, I was just kept on waiting for them to just let loose and go wild, but they don't really do that all that often. That's not to say this album isn't without its bright spots. Psychosocial was the first Slipknot song I ever heard. One of the first songs I learned on bass guitar, and it always has a special place in my heart. Dead Memories is kind of a ballad in a way, but still great. Sulfur has one of the hardest bass lines of any Slipknot song. And of course, as a bass player, I do appreciate complicated bass parts. And of course, there's Snuff, which is a full-on ballad, really. I wish they would perform it live now, because they don't really do it anymore. In fact, as far as I know, they've only played it live twice, and one of them was on, I think it was Jimmy Fallon, Jimmy Kimmel, I think it was. And, talk show performances don't really count. Although Corey Taylor still does acoustic versions of it on his solo shows. So that's nice. Corey Taylor's a singer of Slipknot, for all of you Slipknot noobs out there. So yeah, well, this definitely isn't anywhere near their best album. For their final lineup at their classic 9, it's definitely a good swan song for that lineup. Now, for their most recent album, Point 5, The Gray Chapter. One could say that Point 5, The Gray Chapter is sort of a mixture of mainstream Slipknot with chaos Slipknot. And I kind of agree with that, because, it's melodic, and it's melodic, but it's not too melodic. It's hardcore, but it's not too hardcore. The song Custer is definitely could have easily fit in on their self-titled album or on Iowa, because it's definitely the most, of what I've heard, the most chaotic song on the album. I haven't listened to the album that much compared to the other albums, so I don't have a lot of it committed to memory yet, so this segment might be a bit short. New additions Alessandro Venturella on bass and Jay Weinberg on drums. They do a great job on this album. I definitely do kind of miss Paul Gray and Joey Jordison, but I'm fine with these guys being demo placements. They definitely are skilled. What else? Oh yeah, Kill Pop. The song Kill Pop is definitely the most gothic thing they've ever released, certainly. Corey Taylor really shows off his natural melodic singing voice, which is nice, because a lot of time he's just yelling and screaming and growling occasionally, so it's good to hear him singing melodically. Devil and I is the most popular song according to Spotify off this album, and I agree with that, because it really is an awesome song, and they did a good job releasing it as the promotional single for this album. That, I feel, definitely got people pumped for it. XIX, or 19 in Roman numerals, it's almost pagan metal in a way, with the bagpipes they have in there. It's a somber tribute track to Paul Gray, of course, their recently deceased bass player. I feel they did good putting it on the album, because it's definitely adds to the album's overall quality as a whole. And yeah, this is their most recent album, so I feel like the discussion video part of this video is going to end here. So yeah, I don't have a lot else to say in this video. Like, comment, subscribe. If you like this video, share it with your friends. I'm sure they'd appreciate it. If you weren't a Slipknot fan before you saw this video, hopefully you become one now. They really are a great band. You really should listen to them. That's all I have for today, YouTube. See ya.